The Voynich Manuscript is a book written by hand that is reliably dated to the early part of the 15th century.
Imagine a book over 600 years old, sitting behind glass in a university library. Its pages are covered in flowing, elegant handwriting and strange drawings of plants that do not exist anywhere on Earth. For more than a century, some of the best code breakers alive, including the team that once cracked Nazi Germany's Enigma machine, have tried to read it and failed. They could not even translate a single page of it. Then, a small university computer lab pointed an AI language tool at the book instead of a team of historians. Within days, headlines around the world were calling it solved. But do you know what actually happened once other experts looked closely at that claim? This is the real story of the Voynich Manuscript, the AI breakthrough that made global news, and the uncomfortable question of whether it actually proved anything at all. Let's get into it. The book nobody can read. The Voynich Manuscript is a real physical book. It sits inside Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, catalogued simply as MS408. The book is 240 pages long and is written on an animal skin parchment known as vellum. In 2009, researchers at the University of Arizona radiocarbon dated 4 samples of that parchment. The dating puts it somewhere between 1404 and 1438, the middle of the late medieval period in Europe. That tells us when the book was made. It does not tell us who wrote it, why it was written, or what any of it actually means. Those mysteries begin the moment you turn the first page. And before anyone even reaches the text, the illustrations raise their own questions. Plants that match no known species anywhere on the planet. Pictures of unclothed women bathing in pools connected by odd tube-like structures. Circular diagrams some researchers call rosettes, containers resembling medieval pharmacy jars. None of the images fit neatly into any known medieval tradition. And beside many of these illustrations sit dense blocks of text. These are written in the same flowing, elegant handwriting that is seen throughout the manuscript. Some scholars believe they may be recipes or instructions of some kind. Researchers who have studied the entire document say there are 20 to 30 unique characters used throughout the text. That number is roughly in line with a normal alphabet. The letters flow smoothly across the page in a handwriting style that looks confident or copied stroke by stroke, the way a forger imitating an unfamiliar script might write. Words are clearly separated by spaces, and paragraphs break the way you would expect in an ordinary book. Every visual signal says this is genuine, fluent writing. Nobody has ever found another document anywhere in the world using this same script. There is no second example to compare it against. There is remarkably little disagreement. The manuscript is genuine. But the moment anyone tries to answer one simple question, what does it actually say? The consensus disappears. And that is exactly where artificial intelligence entered the story. The AI analysis. Every attempt to read this book has to start the same way, by first figuring out what language it's written in. That is exactly the problem a couple of computer scientists from the University of Alberta, Canada, decided to tackle. In January of 2018, a computational linguistics professor, Grzegorz Kondrak, started working with a graduate student, Bradley Hauer. They did not attempt to translate the Voynich text directly like everyone before them. They tried something nobody had attempted before: AI analysis. Kondrak and Hauer built an artificial intelligence program designed to figure out the manuscript's original language before worrying about any individual words. Their method was clever. They fed the AI program hundreds of translated copies of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 400 different languages. Then they had it compare patterns in those texts against the patterns found in the Voynich script itself. The researchers said that they actually expected the answer to be Arabic. Once the AI finished comparing the texts, it pointed somewhere else entirely. A result even Kondrak later admitted surprised him. But to actually test individual words against a real dictionary, the researchers had to be careful how to approach this. First, they had to convert the manuscript's strange symbols into ordinary Roman letters. They did this using a standard translation system that other Voynich researchers had already developed for exactly this purpose. Once the text existed in a form a computer could read, the AI checked how many of the manuscript's words matched real Hebrew words. It did this by shuffling the letters inside each word into every possible order. The two researchers built on a theory that the text might be using something called an alphagram. This is a technique where each word could represent a scrambled version of another word, with its letters rearranged. According to Kondrak himself, the results were striking. More than 80% of the words that they tested came back matching something in an actual Hebrew dictionary. But matching a dictionary and forming a coherent sentence turned out to be two very different problems. And the moment they tried applying that Hebrew theory to actual sentences from the manuscript, something happened that turned a modest academic finding into a global news story almost overnight. One sentence, worldwide headlines. The AI algorithm had already flagged a handful of individual words before they ever got close to a full sentence. These words had been translated from ordinary Hebrew terms, were scattered plainly throughout the text. Those isolated word matches were interesting, yes, but they were nowhere near as newsworthy as an actual sentence. And when Kondrak and Hauer combined their scrambled letter theory with Google Translate, they got exactly that. One complete, coherent sentence. That sentence came out roughly as this: "She made recommendations to the priest, man of the house, and me and people." Kondrak described the finding to reporters as a genuine, useful clue, something a Hebrew historian could realistically build on. News outlets ran with it fast and loose. Fox News published a headline declaring the manuscript finally decoded. Canadian outlets covered the story widely. Global News interviewed Kondrak directly about the discovery. It genuinely looked like one of history's most stubborn mysteries had cracked open, all because of a small university AI lab in Canada. That excitement did not last very long once other experts looked closely at exactly how that one sentence had actually been produced. The backlash. Medieval scholars and longtime Voynich researchers pushed back almost immediately. Damian Fleming, a medievalist at Indiana University Fort Wayne, was one of the loudest critics of this discovery. He publicly mocked the finding on social media within days of the story breaking. It was not about the language identification itself, which relied on genuinely solid statistical methods. His complaint was about the final translation step. The team leaned on Google Translate, which is a tool built for modern Hebrew. The words in the Voynich document might be over 600 years old. Other critics also pointed out that no actual historian of ancient Hebrew had been brought in to verify the meaning. This was something Kondrak himself had already acknowledged was necessary before anyone could treat the manuscript's meaning as confirmed. Historians were quick to note that this exact pattern had happened many times before. A loud public breakthrough followed by a quiet correction once nobody could reproduce the result. This was simply the newest version of a very old story. And that pattern would repeat once again barely a year later. This time, it was backed by even more institutional weight, than a university press release. Another breakthrough. The University of Bristol issued a very bold press release in 2019. They announced that one of their researchers, Dr. Gerard Cheshire, had cracked the manuscript's code, and it only took him 2 weeks to do it. Cheshire claimed the text was written in an extinct language he called Proto-Romance. This is an early spoken form of Latin. His paper, published in the journal Romance Studies, news outlets from CNN and BBC ran the story within hours, and the backlash hit even faster than it had for the AI study the year before. Lisa Fagan Davis, executive director of the Medieval Academy of America, called the entire Proto-Romance language idea nonsense. She said that she had actually tried applying Cheshire's proposed method herself. It falls apart the moment you use it consistently. You could bend the same symbols into whatever words you wanted, and get whatever answer you were hoping to find. The University of Bristol pulled the article from its own website within a single day of this criticism. Their official statement was that concerns had been raised about the validity of the research, and both were quickly withdrawn once outside experts checked the work. And this was not even the first time a confident claim about the manuscript's meaning had collapsed within days of making headlines. Back in 2017, a British researcher named Nicholas Gibbs published his own theory in a major literary magazine, saying it was a medical shorthand rather than a genuine hidden language. That story also spread quickly through major outlets before other scholars pointed out that his proposed translations were not grammatically valid. The theory quietly faded from serious discussion within weeks after that. We had the AI analysis in 2018 and the Bristol claim in 2019. This pattern of a big announcement, followed by a fast, quiet correction, was already familiar to anyone who had followed this manuscript closely. A third theory floating around this manuscript, the closest thing to an expert-approved explanation. It is also very controversial, because it argues that nobody has ever successfully translated the manuscript because there was never anything real to translate in the first place. Nothing to translate. Back in 2004, a researcher named Gordon Rugg proposed something completely different from any language-based theory. Could have been produced using a simple tool called a cardan grill. This is a piece of cardboard with holes cut into it that gets placed over a table filled with word fragments, arranged in columns. Slide the grill into different positions over that table, and you can generate word after word that looks like a real language, with one key difference. Rugg pointed to an unusual pattern in the manuscript's word lengths, a pattern natural human languages rarely produce on their own. He put it as evidence supporting exactly the cardan grill kind of mechanical process. He also noted that certain syllables repeat in the text far more often. In genuine written languages, word length and structure usually vary in a messier, less predictable way. To demonstrate the idea, Rugg actually built his own grill system. He used it to generate pages of invented text that did actually resemble the Voynich script. That some reviewers said the method was plausible. There is a serious problem with the timeline, though. The cardan grill itself was invented by Girolamo Cardano in 1550. The manuscript's vellum has been radiocarbon dated to between 1404 and 1438. Rugg argued around this by suggesting two possibilities. An earlier version of the grill could have existed without being documented, or the manuscript's text could have been written on a piece of vellum decades older. And there was one thing that was squarely in the favor of Rugg. Researchers had to admit that the cardan grill explanation does explain the odd word patterns fairly well. But the biggest hurdle to this theory is not that the grill was invented more than a century later. The problem that this theory runs into is the same problem every other theory about this book has been unable to answer. The raw statistics buried inside the language itself, the contradictory evidence. Researchers studying the manuscript's text have used a concept called information entropy to measure how predictable a piece of writing is. Random, meaningless gibberish tends to score very high on this measure, since nothing about it follows any consistent pattern. Real human languages score much lower. The Voynich script scores low, similar to other languages on this measure. Words in the manuscript seem to follow strict internal rules about which characters are allowed to appear at the beginning. These are patterns that look remarkably similar to grammar rules found in genuine languages. This is exactly the kind of evidence that makes some researchers confident there is real, meaningful language buried somewhere in this text. The same kind of statistical pattern that Rugg's Cardan-Grill method can accidentally recreate. And there is no real meaning behind that mechanical process. Because of this paradox, this is an ongoing debate. And researchers have been using the exact same numbers to support entirely opposite conclusions. One side points to the low entropy as proof of hidden meaning. The text is merely mimicking language. It is an insane thing to see that two opposite sides of a debate are using the same figure as their evidence. This confusion over the meaning of the manuscript, whether it even is a language or not, leads us to the search for its origin. Who could have possibly made such a thing that has not been understood after more than 6 centuries of study? And where did it even come from? Origins of the manuscript. The earliest named owner on record is Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who ruled from 1576 to 1612. He reportedly bought the manuscript for 600 gold ducats, believing it had been written by the medieval English philosopher Roger Bacon. That specific claim comes from a letter written decades later by Johannes Marcus Marci, a physician in Prague. The letter is addressed to the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher. From Emperor Rudolph, the book is believed to have passed to his court pharmacist and eventually to an alchemist named Georg Bartschius. According to records, he could not read it either and begged Kircher for help translating it back in 1639. After Bartschius died, Marci inherited the manuscript and shipped it off to Kircher in 1665, along with his now famous letter describing its history. The book then disappeared from public record. It reappeared in 1912 when a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich found it sitting inside a chest in a Jesuit college near Rome. He purchased it on the spot. That is when the manuscript fully came into the public view, and why it's called the Voynich Manuscript. But the manuscript's journey did not end with Voynich. After his death, the book passed through the hands of several private collectors and dealers. Eventually, the American rare book dealer Hans Peter Krause donated it to Yale University in 1969. The university has been its permanent home ever since. So, where do we stand now? How close are we to actually decoding the manuscript? There is the AI language study, the Bristol Proto-Romance claim, and more than a century of ownership records full of gaps. And still, nobody has produced a translation that other independent experts can actually confirm. Kondrak and Hauer's AI work gave researchers a genuinely useful statistical clue pointing toward Hebrew. It is even published in a real peer-reviewed journal. But the single sentence that made headlines around the world leaned on a modern translation tool never built for a 600-year-old text. Kondrak himself was clear that full confirmation still needs a qualified historian of ancient Hebrew. The hoax theory runs into a hard wall in the form of the radiocarbon dating. It supports a manuscript that keeps producing patterns real enough to tempt serious, credentialed scientists. In recent years, Yale has fully digitized every page and made high-resolution scans Anyone with an internet connection can now examine the same pages that have stumped professional cryptographers. The Voynich Manuscript has survived over a century of serious investigation. Every attempt to read it has failed. It has been put to the test against every kind of modern technology available, and the book still refuses to tell its secrets. Do you think this manuscript will ever actually get solved? Or is it simply built to never be read? Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we dig into. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.